Welcome back to the King Films Week 3 College Football Playoff predictions. And before we get started with the rankings, I want to emphasize that only about 10% of you guys are subscribed, so it would really help the channel if you would just look under this video and click that subscribe button if it is red. So let's get right into it with the rankings. Number 25, we've got Mississippi State, and this team has gotten off to an impressive start, starting off with a win against Memphis in their first game and then beating up Arizona on the road. Arizona was already 1-0, are not expected to be the best team this year, but it was an impressive win by Mike Leach's squad nonetheless. Then number 24, we've got Kansas State with Adrian Martinez at the helm. They blew out Missouri and cruised easily in their first game as well. So I think that they are deserving of the 24 spot. Then we've got a confusing one. Maybe some of you think this. If you've been following the AP poll, Texas was not ranked last week. Played number 1 Alabama in a great game. They just came up on the losing end. If they did not lose their quarterback, Ewers, in the first quarter, I think that they would have cruised easily against Alabama, but that's not what happened. Alabama won on a late field goal. So I think that Texas is better than a lot of teams that already have a loss because it was to the former number 1 team. As you'll see, we might have put them down a couple spots for being close with Texas, but was Texas's home environment. So I think that Texas could be a very good squad. That defense was shut out against what is thought to be a very good Alabama offense. Next up, we've got number 22, Texas Tech, who cruised against Murray State in week 1, but the win that got them ranked here was against Houston. They controlled the game for most of it, for the vast majority, but it ended up going to overtime, and they ended up winning in double overtime by a field goal. Number 21, we've got Wake Forest. They returned their quarterback this week against Vanderbilt and looked very good. They moved to 2-0 on the season and are ranked number 21. Ole Miss also works through the kinks of their quarterback competition. Similar to Michigan, we will see who will be the starter for them going forward, but they cruised again, not facing the best strength of schedule so far. Number 19, we've got Washington State replacing the old positioning of Wisconsin in the AP poll. I'm not sure if this was Washington State being good or Wisconsin being bad, but for now we'll have Washington State up here with that 2-0 record. I always like to place a premium on teams winning on the road. Obviously, Washington State was about a 17-point dog on the road in that tough environment, and whether Wisconsin's good or not, it's really tough to get a win there, so I'm going to have to favor Washington State for doing that. And Ole Miss hasn't beaten anyone good, neither has Wake Forest, so that is just the reasoning that I'm going to have to put Washington State above them. Not sure who would win on a neutral site, but Washington State has the better resume so far, and that is what the AP poll might not factor in. Again, these rankings are about 50% preseason expectations and 50% results based. Of course, as we move on with the season, it's only week 3 going into week 3. We will have to adjust that more towards this current season performance, maybe 10% for week or more. Number 18, Baylor suffered the close loss to BYU. Again, that is a hostile road environment. It's just tough to get a win on the road, but obviously BYU is going to be ranked very well, so that is a good loss for Baylor, a really tough one to swallow. I think that this will continue to be a good team. They have a really good ground game, as we saw. Number 17, we've got Utah after their loss to Florida. They were not helped when Florida lost to Kentucky. We'll see Florida a couple spots ahead of Utah here, but Utah came back and bounced back against Southern Utah. Granted, that is an FCS opponent, but putting up 73 doesn't happen every day. So let's check out the middle 8 teams, starting with Marshall, a very impressive win against a reeling Notre Dame team. Obviously, the only reason Marshall's this high is because an 0-2 Notre Dame, who obviously is not in the rankings, did stay close with Ohio State, who's supposed to be one of the undisputed best teams in the nation. So that's why Notre Dame was so high last week, and then Marshall kind of dominated this game. Notre Dame did not look good at all. I really don't think Notre Dame's that good, but this is definitely a Marshall team to be taken seriously. And so far, I think that they are the group of 5 team that is in the driver's seat, despite App State's win. If App State would have beat UNC, I think App State would have been in the top 10, at least for the sake of this ranking. But fortunately, they did not, so we don't even see them in the ranking. But honorable mention to App State in the Sun Belt at large. They are putting up a show this early in the season. Number 15, we've got Mario Cristobal and Miami. They haven't really done much so far, have played some pretty easy opponents, have looked good in their opening 2 games there, both at home. Number 14, Florida probably played the toughest schedule by both of their games, but it always does help to be in the swamp with many fans cheering for your team. One of the toughest environments. I'm pretty sure the swamp is the only reason that they even beat Utah. So we've got to preserve Florida's lead over Utah, and the team that they lost to, Kentucky, you will see higher up in the rankings. Number 13, USC cruised over Stanford. Got a little close late, but USC was well in control for most of the game. Number 12, we've got Michigan State. Honestly, I could flip-flop either of these teams with Oklahoma State, Michigan State, and USC all having pretty similar resumes so far. Michigan State probably has the worse off strength of schedule, as Oklahoma State was able to bag a win against Pac-12 opponent ASU at home. So that was a good win for Oklahoma State there. Then number 10, might be shocking to some of you, not to me, BYU beat former top 10 Baylor at home. We knew that this was a lock through and through, with BYU being a trap game. BYU was actually favored in that game, so maybe Baylor was a little overrated. We'll have to see as the season goes on. But number 10 is where BYU sits right now with that 2-0 record. A very impressive win over USF, and then obviously they were well in control against Baylor. Missed a couple kicks, but ended up taking it down in overtime. And then number 9, Tennessee took down a ranked Pitt team on the road. This is a very good Tennessee offense, and that was a very impressive win over Pitt. Granted, it did come in overtime. That game got a little sketchy down the stretch there. Now we move on to the top 8 teams. And we're going to start with number 8, Oklahoma. This is only because of the preseason expectations. They were so high that I'm going to have Oklahoma here, but we will have to see what happens to this team when they play some of the harder games on their schedule. Moving on to number 7, we've got Clemson. And the AP might think that they're a little higher here, but the offense is a big concern to me. This defense is very good for Clemson. I think they can stick with any team in the country, but you really have to play defense, because teams like Georgia that we'll see at the top have a great offense and defense. So Clemson's 7 for now, but we'll see what happens as they continue to play some of the harder games of their schedule. Number 6, we've got Arkansas. And some of you might be thinking, oh my goodness, you have 4 SEC teams in the top 6. At least to defend one of these teams, Arkansas is replacing Texas A&M. You don't see Texas A&M on here, deservedly so, as they lost to App State. Of course, Arkansas has had a pretty strong schedule so far, beating SEC opponent South Carolina at home, handling them, even though they had Spencer Rattler and were supposed to be pretty good this year. Arkansas has looked good with KJ Jefferson and co, and they also were able to bag the big non-conference win against then-ranked Cincinnati in Week 1. That makes me think that Arkansas is a very good team. Number 5 is Kentucky. They went on the road and grabbed the win over previously higher-ranked Florida, who beat a good Utah team in Week 1. I think this Kentucky team is very dangerous, might even come in second in the SEC East. Personally, I think Tennessee might be a little better, but we'll have to see how things shake out in the SEC East. Number 4 is Alabama, down from pretty much an undisputed number 1. Could have had Georgia at number 1 last week since they did blow up Oregon, but Alabama's playing close to Texas was a little disappointing. Their O-line didn't play great, and the offense really didn't kick into gear until later on in that game, but maybe Texas's defense is legit this year. Who knows? We'll have to see how things shake out down the stretch, but still an impressive win for Alabama, all things considered, as DKR Stadium is a very tough place to play, and Texas certainly seems to be the real deal. So we'll have to see what happens. I don't think Alabama's as untouchable as we thought a week ago, but definitely still very good. Number 3, we've got Michigan. They've had 2 easy games, and they will have another cupcake game next week. So we'll have to see what happens to them down the stretch and what happens in their quarterback competition. Number 2, we've got Ohio State, who's able to cruise over Arkansas State after their win over Notre Dame, which has quickly deteriorated in value, I will say, as you see that we don't have Notre Dame ranked here at 0-2. But Ohio State still has a win over a, pseudo Power 5 opponent at home. Ohio State remains at 2. They're a very talented team, very talented offense. And finally, number 1 is going to be Georgia. They look so great on both sides of the ball. Had a bit of a cupcake game this week, but they deserve it after absolutely blowing up Oregon in week 1. Thank you for watching. Please be sure to once again subscribe to the channel. Only about 10% of you guys are subscribed.